There was a strange period in American car history when automakers were desperately trying to figure out what young buyers wanted. Gas prices had shocked the industry. Japanese imports were exploding in popularity, and suddenly Detroit had to learn how to build smaller cars that weren't giant land yachts with fake wood trim and V8s the size of refrigerators. Some companies adapted better than others. Some created genuinely cool hatchbacks that disappeared almost immediately. And some built cars so bizarre, so forgotten, that even hardcore enthusiasts barely remember they existed. One of the strangest examples has to be the AMC Gremlin. Everybody remembers the Gremlin because people love making fun of it, but hardly anyone remembers how revolutionary it actually was for America. This thing arrived before most domestic hatchbacks even existed. AMC basically chopped the rear off a larger car and said, "There, compact hatchback." It looked awkward, weirdly aggressive, and somehow cheap and futuristic at the same time. But what makes certain Gremlin variants incredibly rare today are the performance trims. AMC actually stuffed V8 engines into these little monsters. Imagine seeing a tiny hatchback with a giant V8 rumbling under the hood during the early 70s. That was insanity back then. Most were driven hard, rusted into dust, or modified beyond recognition. So surviving original examples are almost mythical now. Then you have the Shelby GLHS, which feels like a car invented by somebody trolling the entire industry. Carroll Shelby took the humble Dodge Omni and transformed it into something genuinely terrifying for the era. GLHS literally stood for Goes Like Hell Some More, which already tells you the kind of energy this car had. It was front-wheel drive, turbocharged, lightweight, and brutally fast for the mid-80s. The funniest part is that it looked like an economy car your aunt would drive to buy groceries. Then suddenly, it was outrunning Mustangs at stoplights. Only a tiny number were built, and many were beaten mercilessly because owners realized these cars could embarrass far more expensive performance machines. Finding an untouched GLHS today is like discovering a hidden arcade machine from 1986 that still works perfectly. Another forgotten oddball was the Chevrolet Citation X11. The Citation itself wasn't exactly beloved. In fact, it developed a reputation for quality problems faster than almost anything GM had produced. But the X11 version was weirdly cool. GM took this awkward front-wheel drive hatchback and gave it serious performance tuning. Bigger engines, sharper handling, sporty suspension, aggressive graphics. They genuinely wanted this thing to compete with European hot hatches. And honestly, for a brief moment, it worked. Motor Trend even named the Citation Car of the Year once, which feels almost unbelievable now. Most regular Citations died terrible deaths from rust and neglect, but X11 models disappeared even faster because people drove them hard. Survivors are astonishingly rare today. The Ford EXP might be one of Ford's strangest experiments ever. It was basically Ford asking, what if we turned an Escort into a tiny futuristic commuter coupe? The result looked like something halfway between a hatchback and a spaceship escape pod. It had only 2 seats, ultra-lightweight construction, and fuel economy that mattered enormously during the early 80s. The turbocharged EXP versions, are the ones collectors chase now, because Ford actually tried injecting some excitement into this weird little commuter machine. Most buyers treated them as disposable transportation, though. They were cheap, economical, and never really viewed as future collectibles, which means very few survived in clean condition. Then there's the legendary Dodge Omni GLH, the car that paved the way for the GL's insanity later on. This was another Carroll Shelby-related project, and it completely changed what Americans thought a hatchback could do. Before cars like this, domestic hatchbacks were mostly viewed as boring economy boxes. Suddenly, you had a turbocharged pocket rocket capable of humiliating traditional muscle cars in real-world driving situations. The Omni GLH was raw, twitchy, noisy, and unbelievably entertaining. It became a cult car almost instantly among enthusiasts who understood what it represented. But because they were affordable performance cars, many were modified, raced, wrecked, or destroyed by younger owners who couldn't resist turning up the boost pressure. One hatchback almost nobody remembers anymore is the Plymouth Horizon TC3. Plymouth tried desperately to make economy cars feel sporty during the late 70s and early 80s, and the TC3 was part of that mission. It looked surprisingly sleek for the era, almost European in some ways, and certain trims came with sporty graphics and upgraded handling packages. The problem was that Plymouth's image at the time screamed practicality rather than excitement. People buying Horizons usually wanted cheap transportation, not collector cars. As a result, nearly all of them vanished from existence. Seeing a clean TC3 now feels genuinely surreal because your brain almost refuses to believe Plymouth built something like that. The AMC Spirit AMX deserves far more attention than it gets. AMC constantly punched above its weight during the muscle car era and afterward, and the Spirit AMX proved they still had fight left in them. This compact hatchback mixed 70s styling weirdness with genuine performance attitude. Hood decals, spoilers, aggressive stance, and available inline-6 or V8 power made it feel like a mini muscle hatch before that concept was even popular. But AMC's financial situation was collapsing by then, which meant production numbers stayed low, and long-term survival rates became even lower. Most people today have never even heard of the Spirit AMX, which almost adds to its mystique. Another deeply obscure machine was the Mercury LN7. Ford created the EXP, then Mercury decided it needed a slightly more upscale version because apparently every American automaker in the 80s believed luxury meant adding extra badges and slightly nicer seats. The LN7 had a distinctive bubble-back rear window design that made it look incredibly futuristic at the time. Unfortunately, buyers weren't exactly lining up for premium compact hatchbacks from Mercury dealerships. Sales were terrible. The car vanished almost immediately, and today it's one of those vehicles even dedicated car spotters rarely encounter. You could probably attend multiple car shows without ever seeing one in person. The Chevrolet Sprint Turbo is another forgotten little missile. Technically developed with heavy influence from Suzuki, this tiny hatchback became shockingly entertaining in turbocharged form. It weighed almost nothing, had a screaming little turbo engine, and delivered performance that felt absurd relative to its size. The Sprint Turbo represented a moment when American brands realized small, lightweight cars could actually be fun instead of merely economical. But because they were inexpensive and fragile, survival rates today are unbelievably low. Most were simply used up and discarded like old appliances. And finally, one of the rarest and most fascinating American hatchbacks ever made has to be the Vector W2. Now technically, this stretches the definition of hatchback a little, but the rear opening body design absolutely counts in spirit. The Vector W2 was pure 80s excess. Fighter jet styling, outrageous performance claims, futuristic digital dashboards. It looked like a car from a science fiction movie. Built in microscopic numbers, the W2 represented America trying to challenge European supercars using sheer madness and ambition. It became more legend than actual production car. Most people only know it from grainy magazine photos or old VHS footage. Seeing one today feels almost unreal, like spotting a concept car that accidentally escaped into the real world. What makes these hatchbacks fascinating isn't just rarity. It's the fact that they captured moments when American automakers were experimenting desperately, creatively, and sometimes recklessly. Modern cars are often developed by committees terrified of risk. These older hatchbacks came from eras where companies would randomly decide to shove a turbocharger into an economy car or turn a commuter hatch into a street racing weapon just to see what happened. Some failed horribly. Some became cult legends. But all of them carried personality. And honestly, that's probably why enthusiasts obsess over them now. They weren't perfect. Most were deeply flawed. Interiors rattled, paint peeled, rust attacked everything, and reliability could be questionable at best. But they had soul. They felt like machines built by people trying strange ideas instead of chasing focus group approval. That spirit is becoming rarer than the cars themselves.